Welcome to Hope Natural Health, the podcast inspiring you to be your best version. Join me, your host, Dr. Erin, naturopathic doctor, dog mom, cancer survivor, and girl boss weekly as we discuss all things health, hormones, and happiness with a little side of this thing called life. Welcome back to the podcast. Last week we discussed advice if you're not feeling yourself. So if you're having the summer blues, go back and take a listen to this last week's episode. And now let's dive into this week's. I'm super excited to have a guest with us today. Her name is Alyx Coble-Frakes, and she's a passionate social entrepreneur. She has 10 years of experience in business and 8 years of experience working in health and wellness. When she returned from the Peace Corps in 2015, she felt out of touch with her own health. So she began a path of healing. This led her to launch a health coaching company and oh my gosh.
Let's just take it from the top again.
Like the whole intro?
Yeah.
All right, I got this. Welcome back to the podcast. Last week we discussed advice if you're not feeling yourself. So if you're suffering from the summer blues, go back and listen to last week's episode. And this week I have a special guest with us. She is Alyx Coble-Frakes, who is a passionate social entrepreneur. She has 10 years of experience in business and 8 years of experience working in health and wellness. When she returned from the Peace Corps in 2015, she felt out of touch with her own health. So she began a path of healing. This led her to launch a health coaching program company and the Agenda period. She has recently authored a book called Manstruation, which is opening up conversations around periods with men. So guess what? That's what we're talking about today, menstruation. So welcome to the show, Alyx.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be with you today.
Yeah, I found Alyx, I believe, I found the Agenda period through Instagram because I was researching some nonprofits around period health and period poverty and things like that. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to reach out to them. Or maybe you saw something on social media, I don't know, something like that. So the power of social media and its connections. And I was like, I need to have you on my show because we have not talked about menstruation. And I think it's super important because most women will have, a significant other or someone that they're living with. So I think it's all tied together. So let's talk a little bit first about your background and really a little bit more in detail about how you got into what you're doing now.
Completely on accident. I did not think I would be a periodpreneur. I did not see that in the plans. Yeah, that's what I call us, periodpreneurs. I love it. Periodpreneurs. So I have, like you mentioned, I have a degree in business. So I studied social entrepreneurship and business administration. I left and I worked at the Peace Corps. I really saw myself maybe doing more of the nonprofit route or working with NGOs around the world or USAID, UN, something like that. Like I always thought I would do something badass because I love to help people. I'm really passionate about using the tools of business to create social impact and change. I think it's one of the best ways we can change the world. But I never thought I would have my own company. But when I came back from the Peace Corps, I worked a lot with education. I worked with youth and kept finding that I had terrible supervisors until I realized their only common denominator was me. And I'm like, maybe I just hate having a boss. So maybe I should do something for myself. And so at that point, I'd already been really working on my own health and some health coaching. And I was like, this sounds amazing. I could work for myself, do something really fun, help people, and have that freedom and flexibility that I've been desiring in my life. So I went down the path, went through a health coaching certification program, and then I started tracking my sales. I started trying to bring money into my company, trying to be an entrepreneur. It was completely terrifying. But through that process, I found that I had the highest sales when I was in the ovulation phase of my menstrual cycle. And I had learned about cycle syncing. I had heard the literature around changing how you eat and how you exercise for your cycle. But I didn't hear anyone in the world of business talking about how we can adapt what we do to match with the 4 phases of our cycle. And really now I've come to understand that's just because most people who are lauded as sales experts, most people who are seen as experts in the world of business don't have periods. And so they don't see those cyclical connections. They don't understand how, because their physiology is so similar day after day, where ours is so different. So putting all those pieces together, I initially thought we'd create a planner. I actually have this is our first baby, so this is the planner. We actually showed people how to connect the 4 phases of their cycle and gave them kind of blocks of tasks that they could work on for each of the 4 phases. And it just continued to grow from there. Women asked us a lot of questions, and they kept asking me to make a mobile app. I was like, absolutely not. I have a business degree. I'm a health coach. I am not tech savvy. I can barely get Google Sheets to work, so there's no way I'm making an app. But with time, it really became clear that was the next best thing that we should be working on.
Awesome. So how did Manstruation come about?
So when you're working in the world of business, a lot of the people you have to interface with to raise venture capital or to get funding or to talk about your company, a lot of the people I was interfacing with were men. And men who were well-intentioned but wholly ignorant about the topic and the importance of why we should talk about periods. The comments that I got ranged from like, oh, this is such a niche market, to like, I don't really see the math doesn't work here. I don't know how many people would want this product. And I'm like, do you know how much money people already spend on period tracking equipment? Do you know how many people have periods? But I just kept getting these kind of comments from men consistently, and I got so annoyed that I was like, maybe I'll just write a guide for you, so then you can stop wasting my time and I can show you what's going on here. I can show you why you need to know about this, and you can leave me alone about it, and I can keep building my company. So it was kind of this little side project that has really refueled and recentered the work that we're doing at the Agenda Period. It was a very, again, happy accident.
Oh, it's awesome. So you kind of touched a little bit on it or said it, but when it comes to, men and women's periods or their cycle, a lot of men are like, oh my God, that's so gross, right? Like, you guys bleed out of your vagina once a month. It's disgusting. I don't want to hear anything about it. So, but they can learn so much from us, right? Just kind of like what you talked about in the beginning. So how can we as women educate men about our cycle so they think because it's really a beautiful process when you learn about it and the hormones and all of that. I mean, yeah, it's not fun, but how can we help men understand more about what we go through?
I think a tool like Manstruation is a really good point, because we made it, I kind of think of it as like Understanding Periods for Dummies, but that title is already taken, just like all that whole, that the collection of those books that are just like, learn how computer programming for dummies, forestry for dummies. It's just like, I broke it down to be as simple as possible. I talked about the biology in there. I broke down the entire menstrual cycle. I have a section called It's Just a Phase. So I broke down the 4 phases, what women and menstruators are likely going through. And then I gave them a checklist of ways that they could be supportive in each of the phases of the cycle. So I literally wanted to make it like walk them through it baby step by baby step. So I hope that is a great resource. But one of the things that we uncovered, and I uncovered while writing the book and then continuing a podcast, because I have a goal now to have 100 men talking about periods. I think I've recorded 30 podcast episodes, and it's been really fun. But what men kept bringing up when I asked them really directly, like, why do men suck about talking about periods? Like, what's the problem, y'all? Like, what's going on here? And shockingly and unprompted, man after man after man told me, well, the problem is, like, we never learned about it. We never learned about it back in 5th grade. We never learned about why we should care about this. We really don't know what's going on. So we feel uncomfortable, and we don't really have a good entry point to talk about it. And so for women, what I would say is, if you have young children, if you've got sons, please teach them about your menstrual cycle early. Teach them about the products. Normalize it so often that they don't feel uncomfortable when they actually get to that point of of like interfacing with somebody who's dealing with it. Get to them before the shame sets in. And then if you've got a partner or a spouse, trying to be open about it, trying to answer their questions. Because I think that's what also happens too. There's a lot of content on the internet right now that mocks men for not knowing what they don't know. Like, I've seen those man on the street style interviews where people are like, what an idiot. He didn't know how many tampons you need. Like,
oh, yeah. Yep.
You know, which are funny. They are funny. But it does not actually encourage dialogue, or it doesn't actually encourage change. Because if you just don't know how many tampons you would need, like, why should we make fun of you for that? If you don't know, you don't know what you don't know. And so I think women have had this reactionary defensiveness because we've been treated like crap for a really long time. So it makes sense. But if you want to move forward into a new paradigm with the men in your life, we've got to start unpacking some of that. And it's time to maybe bring a little bit more kindness to the questions that are being asked. Because a lot of times if a man's asking you that, he's like from a vulnerable place. And if you just laugh in his face when he's trying to be vulnerable, it's not going to encourage continued dialogue. So what I found is now sitting with men, and I even did some of those street style interviews myself, but never from like a gotcha perspective. It was really, hey, what do you know about this? Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. And when I have that come from, men have been very receptive.
So in your research, or actually even your podcasting and interviewing of these men, have you seen any, I guess, positive results from them understanding a women's cycle? Like once they actually finally learn about it, and then how do they transform? Like how has that helped them, and I guess their relationship too?
The men have told me consistently, like, because a lot of the men who I've had on my podcast, they already know what's going on. They know what's up. So they're maybe not like the typical audience for this. But the reason I've been interviewing them is because I want other men to hear the stories from a man rather than from me. Like, hey, here's what can go on. Here's what's happening.
Right.
But they've all told me their relationships improved. They've had more rich interpersonal or romantic relationships, really creating safety, emotional safety and security in their relationships, which leads to sexual intimacy, which leads to happiness and wholeness in a home. Like, understanding your partner's menstrual cycle has a tremendous amount of benefits for you as the person without a menstrual cycle. When a woman or menstruator in your life feels seen, heard, and understood, she is more attentive to your needs as well.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Like, it is like the bedrock of a good relationship is understand, because it makes up so much of our experience, like being cyclical. And so having someone see us and hold us and understand that and hold that container with us, like, oh my God, it's wildly potent for men improving their relationships.
Do you have any statistics as far as how many men literally know nothing about a woman's cycle?
I do not. I don't think
I'm just curious. That was totally a random question.
The data, but it's not a lot. The number is very minimal.
And then the ones that do know, how did they learn? Did their partner teach them, or did they learn on their own, or they had like a young daughter and they were a single dad?
The men that I've encountered, the older men absolutely know more, and it's because of being in relationship with women. And then the other group is like anyone in the medical field tends to know more about it.
Yep.
But beyond that, a lot of the, especially young guys, are just like, I asked the guy on one of my interviews, I was just like, how many days? And I told him, this is a conversation about periods. It was a street style interview. I was like, I'm going to talk to you about periods. And I was like, okay, first question, how many days do you think there are in a menstrual cycle? And he was like, I don't know what a menstrual cycle is. So he had like heard the word period, but he hadn't even heard the phrase menstrual cycle. So I was like, oh, we got a lot of work to do.
But yeah, you don't know what you don't know. And I think it's fair to say too, like, men weren't taught it in school. Like, women, we weren't even taught a whole lot about it. It's like an elephant in the room, really.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe things have changed now, but when I was going to school, I didn't learn anything about it.
Also, like, what we kind of been uncovering as we look at the school side is just because of how divisive body stuff has become in public discourse, in politics, even though it shouldn't be. Many schools are shying away from the conversations altogether, or they've got like one bad 20-minute video that they watch in 5th grade and they're like, good to go. You know all you need to know about your cycle.
Yep.
And it's really what has pushed me to, and pushed the company to take this new avenue and begin working on puberty education. So that's really the next frontier for the agenda period, is shifting everything that we've learned, working with parents, working with moms, and getting all girls and boys access to the content they need so that they can be body literate.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you mentioned that to me before we started recording, and that was a good thing. So how will that look? Just like an app or another book, or how is the puberty education going to play out?
It's going to be delivered.
Yeah.
Yep. So right now it is going to be a digital suite of services. We will then be building out video content, video module content in the future. And then, you know, coming from the agenda period, it'll eventually live in app form for sure. Really being able to be on the cutting edge and having a platform that grows with the students as they change, and allowing them to keep access to their important health data.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about cycle syncing, and not necessarily, I mean, we can talk a little bit about, you know, like you said, like, oh, I have my high sales when I ovulate, but also too, I'm curious if you know or see why other women, you know, in the same house, like, will tend to cycle together. And then also to what men need to know about that, or how that comes into, you know, your menstruation education.
It's so funny because anytime when like that question is posed to the allopathic medical system, they're just like, there's no good evidence that shows women sync together. And yet from my own life experience, it's happened to me so consistently.
Right?
Like even like my babysitter and I are now on the same, like, we're on the same menstrual cycle now. And it was not like that when she started working with me, but it's almost like somebody, maybe it's my theory, whoever maybe has like the strongest hormones or something, like just like pulls people to their cycle.
Yeah.
Because now our periods start within 1 to 2 days of each other. So that did not happen before. We were on completely like 15 days apart, and now they start within a couple of days of each other. I'm just like, you can keep telling me that this isn't happening, but I keep experiencing it as happening. And so the tool for any of that, and the way that we get rid of any of the shame and stigma, is transparency. So having some kind of tool, putting it on your calendar, letting your partner know, this is when my cycle is, this is when it starts, this is the first day of my period. I think those are the things. Transparency is the thing that gets us the furthest in terms of getting that support that we need. If we can't talk about it, then we're not going to get the support that we need. And so really, we just need to stop being so afraid to bring this topic out into the light of day.
Yeah, and it goes with anything, you know, nowadays, you know, these uncomfortable conversations, but it's so important for men to know, because I think that, like you mentioned earlier with, you know, why is it important for them to understand? It'll at the flip side, it takes away a lot of arguments, I think, maybe a lot of misunderstandings, shame, you know, like basically like, why are you acting like this? Well, my period's going to start in 2 days. Well, it's already too late. But if a man already understands that, like, oh, she's about ready to start her period, maybe this is why she's a little bit more testy, or maybe I should bring her home some chocolate or rub her feet or something like that. Right?
Yeah, heck yeah.
Tell me some more. I think it's good to hear, you know, so men don't feel maybe bad that they don't know about menstrual cycles. So can you talk a little bit more about some other conversations you've had with men and what you've experienced from your interviews?
Yeah, so a big thing is understanding the product use for the menstrual cycle. That's the biggest one. So, you know, understanding what kind of products your partner is using. And then there's even the guy who wrote the foreword for our book, Chris Patrone. He has great videos that he's made around like having what he calls a coochie container. So he has a basket of products in his house, and he's a single guy. Isn't in a relationship. But then if anyone comes to visit him, there's products there if they need it. So I think that's really, really cool. He's just got a variety of pads and tampons and liners and this little box. And if anyone needs it, he's like, yep, it's in the guest bathroom. You can use whatever you need. So I think that's really cool. And understanding that different people need different kinds of products for their cycle. Something that really surprises men is that your period can be early or late. So even someone who's tracking it well and understands their menstrual cycle, it's not like we've got Google Calendar alert that's like, in 5 minutes, your period
right?
blood will start flowing. Like sometimes you can have cramps for a couple of days before anything actually starts to flow. So it's because there's almost this idea that women are, by asking for products to be in public spaces, that women are being irresponsible. Like, shouldn't you know when your period's coming? Shouldn't you know what's going on? And even as people who are very prepared about their cycle, it can still catch you off guard. And that's always very shocking for men to hear. So that's another really good one. Additionally, like having them really understand women only have a fertile phase 5 to 6 days out of the month. So we can't get pregnant on every single day of our cycle, even though, again, that's a way that the allopathic medical system, I think it's a cover your ass moment. They're like, you can get pregnant any day of your cycle.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, it's true. But you'd have to have a really short cycle or a really weird cycle or an irregular cycle. But if you understand your menstrual cycle, you don't have the possibility of getting pregnant every day because there's not an egg there every single day. It's not like there's always a fresh egg every morning. So I think that's kind of surprising to men, especially about the way that we talk about it. And so really that shows there's a lot more onus on birth control and pregnancy prevention on the person who is fertile every single day, which is a man.
Yes.
So, having them understand and like own, like, no, dude, you're the one who's actually fertile every day. You should be watching where you deposit your little swimmers. That's really been some good conversations as well.
Yeah, that's actually a good flip side, even for like those that are dating and even men. It's like, well, if you meet a woman, it's, you hopefully use protection, but what if you don't? And it's like, crap, where is this woman in her cycle? Because I don't want to have an oopsies here. But honestly, in my entire life, I don't think I've ever had one man ask me that or try and even understand, like, they do ask, like, are you on birth control? But even if you say no, I'm like, I track my cycle, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, huh? What does that even mean? Right?
Yeah, if you are sleeping with someone who you can get pregnant, you need to be a part of that conversation. You need to be understanding that. And because like what we know again, I've never seen a study on this. This is, I have a list of studies I would love to see. This is one. I just know you are more likely to have unprotected sex when you have a higher possibility of getting pregnant because your body desires to push on your genetic material. Your body wants you to make babies, and men's bodies want you to make babies. So both of you are the most likely to make risky sexual behavior and choices when you can get pregnant. That should be like a red flag warning for all of us.
Right? Yep. And that's what I talk daily to women about menstrual health. And just like you've probably experienced, it's like even women don't even know when they ovulate or even track or any of that. I'm like, well, this is the first step. Like, you don't need any birth control to help you. We need to understand your own body. And, I try and teach that every two. It's just wild. But again, it's like you don't know what you don't know, and we weren't taught this. So unless you explore it or learn it from someone else, we're just not going to learn. This is so awesome. I love what you're doing, and I love your whole mission behind the agenda period. And we'll wrap it up here for this topic, but I want to ask one more question that I ask all my podcast guests. What is your best or favorite health tip that you can share with the audience?
My best health tip this is specifically for a woman or menstruator, but like on the flip side, a man could help ensure that their partner is doing this. But at the agenda period, we call it the cycle check-in. So it's just 5 minutes for yourself each day where you take notes, whether it's on our app or on paper or wherever, just saying like, how do I feel? What's going on with my mood, with my energy, with my physiology? And after doing a cycle check-in for about 3 months, you are going to understand what's going really well with your cycle. You're going to understand what's not going well. And then from there, you're going to be able to seek services to support yourself and improve your hormonal health. But it just takes, it's that cumulative effect of 5 minutes a day of your own loving attention makes a gigantic impact in your lifetime hormonal health. So that is where I would encourage everyone to start.
I love it. It's good practice. Just another ritual. Add it into your daily morning journaling or routine. Awesome, Alyx. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention that we didn't cover?
just come hang out with us. Check out the Agenda Period wherever, like on all the social medias, on TikTok, on Instagram, Facebook. Check out the LifeSync curriculum and really just help work with us to create a new generation of body literate individuals, both girls and boys. We're really excited for the mission. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the puberty education come out too. That's super important. And again, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to, continuing to help, your mission. And I know I owe you some blog posts, I think, or blog topics. We were talked about that. So I look forward to providing that. But again, thank you for being here on the show.
Thank you so much.
That's a wrap, everyone. We will see you all next week.